People are still rolling in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Luis Gutierrez, the administrator for the Retirees and Emeriti Association. I'm going to introduce Dorla Cantu, who will introduce our speakers for today.
All right, thanks, Luis. I'm Dorla Cantu, and I'm with the UCSF Retirees Association Board. And today is another presentation jointly with UC Berkeley Retirement Center. So we are glad you're all with us, and because we have a panel of speakers today from the Institute on Aging, and they're going to be talking about living options as we age. Founded in 1975, the Institute on Aging is one of California's largest community-based nonprofit organizations, providing comprehensive health, social, and psychological services for older adults and adults living with disabilities. IOA's mission is to enhance the quality of life for adults as they age, by enabling them to maintain their health, well-being, independence, and participation in the community. Long considered one of the most innovative and diverse organizations of its kind, Institute on Aging annually touches the lives of more than 50,000 older adults and adults with disabilities and their families each year through programs designed to alleviate isolation and enable seniors to continue living independently in the community. Today, we are joined by Francie Bettinger. Francie is a gerontologist, certified case manager, and an advanced professional member of the Aging Life Care Association. She served as a commissioner on the Marin County Commission on Aging. Meredith Scully is the vice president of home care and support services for Institute on Aging, where she is responsible for overseeing IOA's home care division. Jamie Escubas is Senior Director of Campania at the Institute on Aging. And Cherie Gallant is a Geriatric Care Manager and Senior Clinical Social Worker with the Institute on Aging. Welcome, panel.
Thank you so much. So what I'd like to do is share my screen here. And let's see. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for having us. And we've been really looking forward to our presentation on informed choices and understanding living options as we age. So first of all, we decided it would be really valuable to everybody to have a panel discussion to include the leaders in our departments at the Institute on Aging who address living choices as we age on a daily basis. And all have had multiple years of experience in their specialties, so they can speak to the many facets of the living option choices that we all have. Meredith Scully, as she was introduced, is our VP of Home Care and Support Services. And Jamie Escobas is the Senior Director for Companion and Dementia Services, which includes our Adult Day program. And Jamie has over a decade of experience in senior living as well, so she can answer a lot of those questions. And Cherie Gallant, she heads our care management department and has guided families and individuals throughout the process of making informed living choices for years. So my own background is in gerontology and geriatric care management. So the topics that we're going to cover are the aging journey, living longer, and healthy aging, assessing needs and desires, individual choices as we age, living options, and trusted advisors and resources. So before we talk about where we want to live, I think it's really important to consider that worldwide, we are living longer. And this has a big impact on how we live today and in our future. And so important things to consider are our lifestyle and how we want to age. Today, most people can expect to live into their 60s and beyond, and every country in the world is experiencing this kind of longevity and growth in the aging population. And these additional years provide us with the chance to pursue activities and passions that we have. It really allows us to be with our families longer and participate in community, and to really be full and long living participants in life. However, all of this is very dependent on our health. So when it comes to health, there's no typical older person. Biological aging is only loosely associated with the person's age in years. Some 80-year-olds, as you know, have physical and mental capacities similar to many 20-year-olds, regardless of their lifestyle. They just may have picked the lucky straw, or they actually have a gene component to it. But what's happening is that the impact of our environments really has a big say in how we age, if we're aging healthy or not. Well, while there are other people who experience declines in physical and mental capacities at much younger ages. So although the differences in older people's health are genetic, there's recent studies that most of it is due to people's physical and social environments. And we see this over and over in the new studies coming out on healthy aging. So good questions to ask are, how am I managing my health and practicing healthy aging? And how does this impact how I will live and where I will live in the future? So speaking of the future, I found this study that is from the Stanford Center on Longevity. And it's about the future of aging, and it's called the New Map of Life. And they have predicted, by the trajectory that's happening in today's world, that the 5-year-olds born today will be 100, live to be 100. So how are we going to be living that life? So I thought that it was important to really look at some of the innovations that and the principles that they've discovered that would be contributing toward a positive impact. And we can apply some of these today. However, this is really about the future of aging. So age diversity is net positive. What that means is living with an intergenerational focus so that we can learn from each other and really benefit from the wisdom of those that are older and have youth around us. Oftentimes we are very separate in the way that we're living today. Invest in future centenarians to deliver big returns means beginning at the preschool or birth to kindergarten, really investing in that individual's cognitive, emotional, and social health and for a happy future ahead. And to align health spans to lifespans. What that means is it requires investing in public health at every stage of our life. Being prepared to be amazed by the future of aging means all the medical advances that we take advantage of today, which is contributing towards our longevity, and experiencing the technology. And there's so many new things in technology that help us to age in place today. So we are looking at working more years in life, obviously. It's happening today. Over the course of 100 years, we can expect to work 60 years or more, and workers need flexibility. And we've been pivoting around COVID and see the flexibility in our lives now around work. I think that that's a very important thing to look at in the future. And learning throughout life, lifelong learning. I went back to school just to show my daughter that it's about lifelong learning. I changed careers at an older age in life because I wanted to go to school while she was going to school. I mean, looking at aging and looking at learning from a different lens and helping us to be able to continue to learn as we age will enrich our lives. Build longevity-ready communities. That means looking at the communities that we live in and seeing the impact on our aging from those communities. Is it a polluted environment? Is it an area where people can get out and be physically active? All of these things are important to consider. And in the road ahead, it involves all of our entities and communities. It involves our public health, it involves our hospitals, it involves everyone. So it's an initiative for involvement from everyone to belong to a healthy well-being, a healthy aging community and world. So initiatives today, a lot of them are based on what was discovered in the blue zones. And the blue zones was a study on healthy aging, and they looked at these different areas in the world to see how these people were living such long and healthy lives. And this study revealed that it's not simply one thing, but many life choices combined. And also the environment, again, has a lot to do with it. And this was a study in 2004 when Dan Buettner partnered with the National Geographic and the NIA, National Institute on Aging, along with some of the world's best longevity researchers, and to identify these locations around the world where people live better and longer. And so you see them here. We have Japan and Greece, California, Loma Linda, Costa Rica, and Italy, and in these specific towns. So they found that, researchers found that people reach the age of 100 at a rate that is 10 times greater than in the United States, and with lower rates of chronic disease. And since over the years, the Blue Zones organization has been identifying areas throughout the US to recreate some of these blue zone type communities. I, for one, am involved in Age Friendly Fairfax, which is another initiative that kind of came out of this research of a community-based living. And all of Marin County has taken along the initiative, and it's supported by the World Health Organization, to make every town within Marin County a age-friendly town. And what that means is you're not age-friendly just because you have the designation, but you're age-friendly by the work that you do towards addressing your own town's ability to age in place. So these are some of the characteristics or the different things that we found in common in the blue zones areas, that people move naturally. And what that means is that they physically were able to move without thinking about it. They're not going out and joining gyms. They're actually working in their gardens. They're being very physically active, and they're not even thinking about it. It's just incorporated into their life. Right outlook means purpose, finding purpose. That has been such an important part for me as a gerontologist to look at. Do we have people that feel that they are a part of the community? Because so often people, as they age, retreat and they just don't feel like they have purpose anymore. So building that back into our lives is super important. Downshifting, obviously, this is stress related. How do we deal with our stress? Stress leads to chronic inflammation, and it's associated with every major age-related disease. So we really have to manage our stress. And within these different cultures, it's built in. They pray, they meditate, they take part in activities that really lower their stress. Eating wisely. Obviously, nutrition has a lot to do with our healthy aging. And we have found out that the Mediterranean style diet is a very healthy diet for people. It has mostly plant based, but it does have some meat, but it's not huge portions of meat. And then they also adapt the 80% rule, and the 80% rule is don't eat until you're overstuffed. When you're 80% full, stop there. And my favorite is wine at 5. I've read recently, it's not just wine, it can be alcohol. So, but it is, of course, always in moderation and not too much, but just enough to probably adds to that downshift. And it is known to be a healthy thing to do. Connecting, right tribe. I think this is really interesting that within these blue zone communities, there are groups, little factions of 5 that are built into a support system for each individual, and they support healthy living. So it matters who you have surrounding you. Those habits can be learned. So it's great to have people who are positive around you that can contribute and help you stay in track with your healthy aging. loved ones first, family first, family, being very involved in family. A lot of these communities have their older adults living with them. They take care of their own, and they have a sense of belonging within their community, which also supports well-being. I love this study. A recent Harvard study revealed that close relationships, whatever kind of relationship it is, if you have a close one, more than money or fame, are what keep people happy throughout their lives. I think that this is such a sweet and wonderful thing to keep in mind, and to try and stay in the moment of your relationships, although we're all challenged at times, I'm sure. No, I am. So individual choices, I think this is a really important part of what we need to do. Is I have all these wonderful things to tell you of how to age, but it's really important to know that we are all individuals and we're all going to make our choices. And Institute on Aging really is a very, very much respects the individual, and especially those in aging. And I'd like to share with you all this little film that we have.
When I was younger,
Francie, I think you need to share the sound. on the
Oh,
video.
I thought it was shared.
Oh.
I'm so sorry. Let me see if I can do that. I'm so sorry. Share sound. Let's see. Good.
I want to
Can you
love
hear it
and be
now?
loved.
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just going to restart.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I have good days and bad.
But I get up every day knowing that I'm the same person I was 10,
20, 30 years ago.
And while my body can sometimes get tired or broken,
my spirit,
My thoughts
and passions
Remain strong and invincible.
because when you get to be my age,
you come to realize I'm still
me,
So my apologies for that. I didn't realize I had to press the button every time. So my apologies, but I think you got the gist of it. And that I think that that's really an important part to remember, that when we are when we are with an older person, oftentimes they are not seen for who they were and who they are today, because that never changes. We are still that person, and no matter what our age. So now I'm going to introduce back to the screen Jamie, who's going to talk about our living options, the choices that we make. Jamie.
Thank you. I was starting my video.
Oh, good.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks, Francie. So what is aging in place? That's where we're headed next in our discussion. It's a term that Francie's already referenced a few times as she's been sharing just a lot of great information about aging across the world. So it's a term that really identifies that older adults choose to live where they are, typically living in their homes. We know that 3 out of 4 adults over the age of 50 hope to stay home. Reality is they don't oftentimes want to or choose to move. They want to live for as long as possible in what's most familiar to them, where they've been maybe for the last 20, 30 years. So it's their wish typically to stay at home. But what we also know that is true is that the support that they will require or need over time is definitely going to continue to expand or to grow, and that their own health and how they're connected to the community, as Francie had indicated, through relationships, opportunities to be supported within their own environment is critical to also how they can age at home and in place. So there's lots of resources we're going to talk about today that can help fill the gap to living at home, to enable that person to thrive and to be as independent as possible. You know, one of the things I think that we discussed in our introduction is that at the Institute on Aging, one of the things we strive to do is to keep people in the community, to keep them engaged and to keep them living as independent for as long as possible. But first and foremost, before we talk about a lot of those resources to fill the gap, the first thing to really consider is safety. What is the environment like that's going to make it a safe place to be and to continue to be as the needs change? So it's really important to thoroughly assess a physical environment of the person, either of yourself and your own individual environment or of a loved one. So really taking a hard look at what is it going to take for that person to be successful at home. There's lots of things to consider, and I think we become really complacent in this area or really comfortable, and it's really hard to take that deeper dive into understanding what the real needs are or the challenges that someone might have in their own living space. It's also a hard topic to breach with family members. I would say that can be really challenging because it's someone's personal space, so it's really hard to initiate your own opinions or your own thoughts around their environment. So things to consider when you're looking at your own environment would be like steps, stairs. What's the entry like to get in and out of the home safely? Is there an opportunity for someone to move or relocate in the home into a main level? Are they able to bring their bedroom downstairs and to be more safe and manageable in one smaller environment of their home? Have we considered the upgrades that might be needed in terms of the grab bars, the walk-in shower options, things that really just help give them that extra little bit of support that they may not know that they need or may not know how to ask for. So consider also maybe the accessibility of the floor plan. Maybe there's things that need to be modified just to make it easier to get around the home. And a big thing that I think people overlook a lot of times in their own environment is relating to adequate lighting, rugs, people's favorite decorations, or certain pieces of furniture that might be imposing on their physical space and making it more of an unsafe environment. Next slide, thank you. Many of the agencies or support services that you might access will help work with you on these types of assessments and often will provide you with options. Sorry, are you able to turn to the next one?
I don't know when it's changing.
Is it frozen? Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
okay,
it
perfect.
was frozen for a second.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. So a checklist is a great tool or a reference to be able to navigate or to have this conversation with someone about their home, or even for you to self-identify things that might be needed to change in your own environment. So really, one of the things that can happen is if somebody might have had a history of falls or maybe an increased risk of a fall, an important thing to maybe suggest to a doctor is a physical therapy or an OT evaluation of the home can be a great resource or a tool to help you professionally identify what might need to change. Some other things beyond the physical environment would be access to somebody else. Is somebody else able to come into the home if if there was an emergency? Is there someone that can come and help get that person out in the event of some sort of evacuation or required exit? And also another thing to consider is the vulnerability of the person who's living alone. Just being able to identify if there's concerns about them being left alone and somebody, approaching their space. So considerations to remain at home, what makes it really optimal for someone to stay in their space for as long as possible would be connection to different resources. Are they able to get to the store, to their own doctor? Are they able to be connected to neighbors? A lot of times I think we overlook the challenge of social isolation, which Francie had mentioned a little bit about earlier. And so it's really important that people still feel they are connected and there's somebody else out there kind of watching or paying attention or knowing what's going on next door. Do they also have access to issues, or excuse me, let me take a step back. Can they perform also, the daily tasks that are required just to be able to take care of their own needs at home? So sometimes they might not self-identify that those kind of things are falling through the cracks, and somebody may need more than they realize or let on or ask for. Next slide. Thank you. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of resources that help in our community to help support us to keep us at home for as long as possible. If we have considered that safety is in check and we're feeling good about where we are, there's other things that can help to supplement or to support that person as they stay at home. Transportation can be a real challenge, especially just navigating the public transportation system as we get older can be really complicated. So considering like a tailored service for older adults, such as paratransit, might be a great option for someone. Meals on Wheels. I think a lot of times people also neglect to realize that somebody's nutrition is compromised when they're at home alone. There's just this lack of enthusiasm about cooking for oneself. So having a support service like Meals on Wheels coming in provides that needed resource, but also what people don't consider is it's a daily wellness check that can really be a great peace of mind for people. Another concept that's becoming really popular is the village concept. So that's where residents in a community create or coordinate their own delivery of services. So it's usually for people 60 and over. There are vetted resources that they share. There's volunteers that they share. There's often a membership. But it is something that's growing. I think in the US right now, there's actually over 200 villages. I did find in preparing for today that there is one, it's the sfvillage.org, for example, a local community village that's nearby. The additional things I want to discuss in terms of supplementing people at home really relate to the adult day program and home care. So those, next slide, please.
Yeah. For some reason it's not going to the next slide.
Okay. Well, I will go on and I'll share with you what the next slide says. According to the CDC, social isolation, which we go back to again, it's become kind of one of those themes, I think, throughout a lot of our discussion. Social isolation was associated with about a 50% increased risk of dementia and other serious medical conditions. So I think a lot of times throughout our lives take for granted just the social connection. But as someone ages, what we find is as they maybe lose friends or spouses or loved ones, it can be really challenging to reconnect or to feel connected to others. So not only does the social isolation increase your risk of dementia, but it can also increase your risk of heart disease, stroke, depression, and anxiety, which are important things to note. So are we having any success?
No, unfortunately, I'm trying.
Okay.
It's frozen.
Let me know if I can help. So I will also call out that during the last 2 years of the pandemic, isolation has accelerated conditions such as dementia. I have had multiple calls, even just in my time working at Institute on Aging, where caregivers will often call in and indicate that they've seen a steep decline in a loved one in their cognitive function over the last few years. And a lot of that has been attributed to the fact that people haven't been out and engaging in activities and groups as they once did due to COVID. So engaging in a program like the Adult Day program is a really important way to fill that gap and to get people back into the community and connected. So I know that's one thing that Francie had mentioned that I oversee at the Institute on Aging, and that is the Adult Day respite program that we have at the Presidio. So what we have found that just by re-engaging in a program like this, like an adult day program, we have seen people who have been able to, oh, sorry.
I thought I'd stop Sharon to try it again.
Oh, okay.
So let me see if that works.
Sure. Success.
There we go. Okay.
The wonders of the technology. It has its advantages and it has its challenges. Thanks, Francie. You can go on to the next slide. Great. So as I was saying, connecting with an adult day program or even a senior center for some can be a really important aspect to living successfully at home for as long as possible. So one of the things just to call out in regards to the adult day program is going back to that sense of purpose, that opportunity for connection. So an adult day program is one of those offerings that people can use to engage with the community in a safe and appropriate space. So for somebody, for example, experiencing cognitive decline, an adult day program can be a really valuable space for them to continue to feel connected, provide them a space for socialization that will, in essence, hopefully slow their cognitive decline. It also gives the caregiver a chance for relief and an opportunity to recharge, to go take a nap, to pay their bills. So it can really be something that actually serves to benefit both people involved in a situation where there is caregiving. It offers support and resources that somebody might not have otherwise accessed or connected with, and it can also supplement other types of care. Another type of care then that I had mentioned on that earlier slide was home care. So home care can also be something that we recognize is truly needed, especially if somebody, going back a few slides, indicated that they're not able to maybe perform a lot of their own personal tasks. That home care resource can be a great addition. So I'm going to turn it over to Meredith, and she'll be able to share more on that home care resource.
And Meredith, my apologies, it's still sticking, so I may have to go in and out again.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? It's telling me that we cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. Start my video. Fantastic. Let's see here. Great. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, well, we'll carry on regardless. So a little bit more about home care. If you're providing care for a loved one currently or have in the past, you know, you're probably very familiar with how much work this can be. No one wants to be a burden to their loved ones, and being a caregiver can really take its toll both physically and emotionally, which can definitely put stress, unnecessary strain on family dynamics. Home care services can help support. Home care is health care or supportive care provided by a professional caregiver in the individual home where the patient or client is living, as opposed to care provided in a group setting or group accommodations like clinics and nursing home. And home care offers non-clinical help and support for what we refer to as activities of daily living and instrumental activities of daily living. Instrumental activities of daily living are things you do every day to take care of yourself and your home. And they are one way to measure how well you can live on your own. Activities of daily living are basic self-care tasks like bathing, hygiene, while IADLs require more complex planning and thinking. So although not necessary for functional living, the ability to perform IADLs can significantly improve the quality of life. So the major domains of IADLs include cooking, cleaning, transportation, laundry, and managing finances. Along, could be balancing a checkbook, managing medications. A therapy plan, it's important to point out that a therapy plan that begins with ADLs and progresses to IADLs will better prepare a patient to re-enter their community and get back to living their life to the best of their ability, or remain in their community to the best of their ability. And it's important to mention also that home health is a service provided in the home setting as well. So not to confuse it with home care, home health provides professional medical assistance. Both types of care are available to your loved one in the comfort of their home and can help in terms of keeping them aging safely in place. It's also important to point out that home care is a private pay service. It's not covered by Medicare, and it may be covered by long-term care insurance, whereas home health is a service provided by Medicare. And those in need of home care may be transitioning out of a hospital as a result of the onset of an acute condition, or those suffering from long developing chronic conditions. So, okay, next slide. We got it. You're ahead of it. Thank you, Francie. So caregiving comes in many forms. Many of us help older, sick, or disabled family members or friends every day. It's important to really take a look at, caregiving is vastly different across many different spheres. So approximately 44 million Americans provide 37 billion hours of unpaid informal care each year for adult family members and friends with chronic illnesses or conditions. With the 65 plus age group expected to double to 70 million people by 2030, family caregivers increasingly provide care for aging parents, siblings, and friends, most of whom have one or more of chronic conditions and who wish to remain in their own homes and communities as they age. These numbers are just astounding and growing increasingly quickly. And it's so important to keep informed of, the resources that are available and how we can help families manage and navigate the healthcare system better. Family members typically provide care for over 75% of care being provided in the United States. And a statistic that we pulled back in 2007 estimated that family caregivers' unpaid contributions was equal to $375 billion. And often it's women who carry that burden. Those are astounding numbers, and those are numbers that we pulled coming from 2007. We can move to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about, thank you, Francie. Let's talk a little bit about what to consider when bringing in support to the home. Identifying professional support in the home can definitely be a challenge. And you have two options, really. It comes down to two options. That one being bringing in a private caregiver who has chosen perhaps to work independently outside of an agency. And then the other option would be using a professional home care agency. And using a home care agency definitely has its benefits. Care typically begins with an assessment of needs, with recommendations then to follow. The agency has and should have experienced and trained caregivers that they can match to meet your needs and provide you with the assistance needed to support you in the home. You also have the benefit of not being responsible for managing the caregiver's duties and responsibilities. You're usually assigned a point of contact, a client service manager, to ensure that your needs are being met. And in the event you're not satisfied, perhaps the caregiver wasn't the right fit, things just aren't going as you had planned, you can reach out to the service manager and work with that service manager so they can work with their team to identify a more appropriate caregiver to better meet those needs. And those are some really important benefits when you're choosing to have somebody in the home. When you hire a private caregiver, and oftentimes that might come into play, you may hear of somebody through a neighbor or a friend or somebody that's local in the community. it's very important to understand the importance of that decision, because you're putting yourself or your loved one responsible for not only managing that caregiver and the activities and the responsibilities that they're going to be responsible for, but you're also taking on the responsibility of becoming a household employer. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the upcoming slides. We'll provide a little bit more information on what it is to hire a private caregiver outside of an agency. Something else that you also want to consider when you're looking at hiring a caregiver through an agency is there are really two models to the services that are provided in an agency platform. One of those models I'll start with is the more common model, and it's an employer model agency where the agency is responsible for all payroll taxes, workers' compensation, and other liabilities. They employ all of the caregivers and they take on that extra burden. These agencies are licensed by the state of California through the Department of Social Services, and they are required to list all of their caregivers on a registry with the state. So fingerprinting has been done, a very thorough background check screening. These caregivers working through those agencies are registered in that system. The other model that you may come across is what they refer to as a registry. And the registry model, although they may screen the caregivers and they do conduct background checks, they are not the employer of the caregiver. And essentially, you pay them a fee for the placement or the referral of a caregiver. And the agency has a 1099 relationship with that caregiver. And it's a really important differentiator. People usually choose the referral registry because of cost. But at the end of the day, it comes down to such a small amount of financial savings, and the risks on the other side could be very steep. One being that being a resident of California, there is, some might argue that there is no such thing as a 1099 relationship with caregivers. So that's a very important point to consider. The other piece of that is the 1099 model. The registry model is not licensed by California Department of Social Services. So you really need to make sure that you do your due diligence and really understand, do your own background check and screening on caregivers, check references, really understand who it is that you're bringing into your home. So those are really the two models for home care services. The other pieces, we'll move over to the next slide. Important to consider questions that you want to ask about the caregivers when you hire an agency. What is that background check process for caregivers and even other staff that you'll be working with? They may have client service managers that are coming into your home as well. Are the caregivers themselves licensed? Keep in mind, caregivers are not always licensed. When I say licensed, I mean certified nursing assistant certification or a licensed vocational nurse, which is certainly not necessary in a non-medical model. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing when a caregiver doesn't carry a certification. So you want to be sure to uncover more about what the criteria is and the years of experience and the skills set of those caregivers that are providing services. A lot of agencies recruit caregivers who come from all different industry backgrounds, and we have caregivers who are retired from professional careers that want to give back to their community. So having a certification in a situation like that may not be necessary. Does the agency provide benefits and support to their caregivers? That's a very important component, because when they provide that support and benefits and they treat their employees well, those employees are going to treat their clients well. What happens if the caregiver doesn't show up to a shift? How quickly can the agency provide replacements? These are really important pieces to consider, especially when you have a loved one that can't go without care. What training do the caregivers receive? Most agencies licensed through the state are required to meet certain training criteria on an annual basis. And who trains the caregiver on care plans to meet those clients' needs? Who supervises the caregiver? Very important points when you're interviewing an agency. So how to get started? Once a client, you want to consider a few things. Is there a contract that you're obligated to keep and enforce, or is there a cancellation policy? Most agencies should not require a cancellation policy. If you decide, and this is a service you're paying for out of pocket, if you decide it's not working for you, you should certainly be able to call the day of and say, no, thank you. We're making other arrangements. How often are you billed for those services? If you do have long-term care insurance, are they going to bill the insurance company direct, or is that something you'll have to be responsible for? Can you expect to receive status updates on how your loved one is doing? This is a very important piece to the quality of the services being provided. If you have a loved one that lives out of state or you're not local, this is an important piece that might be information that you'll want to receive every day, updates on how your loved one is doing. Oftentimes agencies have the appropriate technology in place now with all the advanced technologies out there where you can look in on your loved one via an app, and caregivers are documenting, what happened throughout the day and how things went and how was mom's mood and what was the day like for her. Who is your point of contact? Do you have a care manager that will provide access to more resources if you need them, or somebody you could talk to when there's a change of condition, and somebody you can talk to when you're not, feeling that maybe the caregiver isn't meeting your needs? What is the process in the event your caregiver doesn't meet those needs? How are they handling that? And, how quickly can they make those necessary changes? So those are just some of those things to consider. And we also wanted to just share a little bit too. People often make the decision to hire privately, and it's usually due to cost, because agencies carry a burden that they have to pay, and there are businesses that have to make a profit. So if you're going to think about hiring private, you want to really stay away from those online sites that we hear from time to time are subject to certain scams. I'm sure we've all heard them. You want to be very careful about that and look locally. If I were to make a recommendation, Nextdoor is a very popular site where people are very connected to their community. And I have seen for example, in my Nextdoor neighborhood, caregivers who I happen to know in the industry who might be on there, sharing that they're available for certain hours. So if you're going to be going outside of an agency, that would be a recommendation that I would consider, and always get references and talk to your neighborhood neighbors, and make sure that this person is really who they represent themselves to be. Very important. Also important to utilize an industry vendor to learn your responsibilities as a household employer. I put on here, care.com is a vendor that our industry has used and does use as a recommendation. They are vetted and they provide valuable guidance to what you are responsible for when you become a household employer. And I really recommend this, especially as your loved ones might have changes of condition where the physicality the caregiver is subject to could be challenging, and workers' compensation is not something you want to fall on you, and you don't want that responsibility of having to be liable for any injuries in the home. So that's a site that I would recommend that you really research before you make the decision to hire private. And I think that is it for home care. I'll go ahead and transition back over to Jamie. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Meredith. All right, so we're going to briefly discuss the options when someone isn't choosing or isn't able to live at home. So we'll go starting with independent living. We'll go to that slide first. So this model, independent living community, might be appropriate for someone who doesn't need daily care assistance, but perhaps maybe they do not drive any longer. Sorry, I'm trying to find my own picture here. And maybe they are worried about their own safety, just not feeling comfortable being at home anymore. They want to know that other people are around them. It might be somebody who also is just seeking that companionship. So an independent living community could be a great opportunity for people. It might be just somebody who just does not want to maintain their home anymore. So they might choose to live in this type of community. Next slide, please. So we hear a lot about continuing care retirement communities. They are often referenced as CCRCs or a residential care facility for the elderly, an RCFE. So this can be a good choice if somebody is starting to need assistance in making some healthcare decisions. So maybe they are also needing some hands-on assistance similar to that Meredith has described. Allows the resident to transition typically in that environment. So they may not, they may move in and they may be just taking advantage of enjoying the meals and really getting, preferring not to do that task anymore. But as needs change, maybe they start to need some assistance, just supervision to assist with some of their household tasks, or maybe they're not feeling safe comfortably taking a shower without knowing someone's nearby in case they had an emergency. So that environment of a residential care facility allows the person to grow into other services as they need it. It's often very a la carte. You can kind of pick and choose what you need and tailor it specifically to what those needs are and change and modify as they change. It's important to note with an RCFE, it's not a nursing, not 24-hour nursing care. In fact, it's not required that a nurse is on staff. So just keeping in mind, considering it is more of a social model. CCRC, for example, also may not have all elements of care. So it could change or it could be different or specific to certain communities. There can be a cost or an entry fee with this type of environment. These are licensed by the Department of Social Services. So I call that out just to give you information that you can go on the Department of Social Services website, and they do have to publicly post the compliance records so that they have at their different at those locations. So that might be a good way for you to do your own research on identifying which communities might be the best option. An RCFE also can include a boarding care. So some people will hear of smaller homes as an option, and that is a boarding care licensed in the same way that the larger communities are. So when is it time for assisted living? So a part of that RCFE model is assisted living care, as I described. So that could be a really important move for someone who is experiencing a chronic medical condition. We know that through a record of the AARP, more than 70 million people aged 50 and older have at least one chronic medical condition. So potential for medical emergencies might also increase during this time. So being in an environment where there's a quick response can be really helpful. Diseases like dementia might also prompt somebody into moving into an assisted living supervised environment. That you might recognize that someone's no longer able to handle their own money. They're really having trouble just juggling all the tasks related to being at home and managing a lot of their executive decisions that are required. So being placed or being moved to an assisted living could be a good way to keep them safe and to keep their lives organized. Isolation, again, kind of going back to that, can also be one of those things that prompts people into an assisted living environment. You might also identify that, you know, someone is just becoming really messy. They're just not even able to maybe provide the grooming that you're used to seeing. Their presentation is just not the same in terms of just how they're pulling themselves together or how their space in their environment is. These can be really good indicators that living at home is becoming really overwhelming, and they may be, suitable to move into more of an assisted environment. So assisted living covers the middle ground. So if you think about it in terms of offering some of those meals, those services to support the home, but they can do medication reminders, but keep in mind, again, non-medical, so they may not be equipped or able to do injections. Sometimes there's challenges around diabetic management that are not met through an assisted living environment. So what is memory care? Memory care is another option for people. Often within an assisted living environment, there is an area that's secure, that prevents people from wandering, that is more of a smaller space within the larger community, that can provide specially trained caregivers that can help support as somebody is experiencing cognitive decline. So that space can really help in terms of maybe some of what people would consider behavioral challenges that the person experiences. So that environment is equipped to understand and to be able to redirect and use certain tools to support that person safely. Okay, and moving on to nursing home. So the other option for people to consider is a skilled nursing environment. A lot of times, this can be something that is really limited in time in terms of how necessary that it is for an individual. So it might just be that they are moving into a skilled nursing temporarily to rehabilitate or to overcome some of the more complex challenges of maybe a diagnosis that they have, and then eventually being able to move back into another living environment. So this is that 24-hour nursing support that some people might require, and that this, in some cases, this might be the only option in terms of being able to be safe and to be supported in terms of any medical needs they might have. So I know I rushed through those living environments, and that can be really overwhelming to hear of all those different options. So I'm going to turn it over to Cherie. We know that this is a complicated discussion in terms of everything to juggle and navigate and figure out. So thankfully, there are resources like Cherie and geriatric care management that can help and support families as they make these decisions.
Thank you, Jamie. Can you guys hear me? Yep, great. Francie, let's go ahead and advance the slide. Thank you so much. So, all right. Hopefully you're not feeling too overwhelmed with all of the information that's just come at you. And I'm here hopefully to help, kind of tie it all together. If in fact you have been feeling overwhelmed or a little bit anxious about some of these areas where you or your loved ones might need some support, I hope we can talk a little bit about some trusted advisors. So as you guys know, Institute on Aging is a long-standing nonprofit in the Bay Area. And just to let you know off the bat that we do have a wonderful intake and referral line called IOA Connect, where you can learn more about the services that we offer. And if we don't have a service that is appropriate for you or your loved ones, they have so much knowledge about resources that are available in the community. So just putting that out there. One of the first things, I think that comes up in a meeting like this is thinking about, are your affairs in order? And what does that look like, and who does it take to get your affairs in order? So in a lot of cases, most people, in fact, anyone who's over the age of 18 should have completed an advanced healthcare directive to have a durable power of attorney for healthcare. This person is designated to make decisions should you lose capacity, even temporarily. So there's also durable power of attorney for finance, which is appropriate for fairly simple estates where, again, you've got someone who's ready to step in and write checks for services or take care of your financial matters should you lose capacity or the desire to continue to manage those things for yourself. So most of the time, if you are a homeowner, you may have already consulted with an estate attorney to develop a living trust to protect some of your assets. As we know, the Bay Area, any property that you own in the Bay Area is going to put you over the probate court limit, and it's going to create issues for your heirs. So if you haven't done that, I'd highly recommend it. So if in fact you are not a homeowner, but you don't necessarily have a person that you want to identify as, making these financial or healthcare decisions for you, there is a service called licensed fiduciary, where you have a little bit more. It's a little bit less expensive than utilizing an attorney, but you have more expertise than just using an accountant or so on. So these are folks often with geriatric, specialized geriatric knowledge, special financial knowledge in terms of long-term care planning, et cetera. Thanks, Francie. So, and then finally, talking about care management. This is a great graphic from the Association of, Aging Life Care Association, apologies, that covers, kind of the 8 areas of expertise of an aging life care professional or a geriatric care manager, geriatric social worker, gerontologist, et cetera. So a lot of these, I think we've already talked about. Obviously, we've talked a lot about health and disability and the ways that can, impact your aging in place. Financial issues, I think I've also just talked about. Housing, Jamie was great to cover a lot of available resources. Families and family caregivers, again, like trying to understand your circles of support and prevent isolation. Local resources in terms of, who's available to help, and, advocacy in any kind of medical or other legal situation. So care managers provide all of that. And one of the things that I dislike about that graphic is the one thing that's missing is you. So where do you fall? You should be in the center of that circle with all of those resources around you, having a care manager available to you to make those connections around the circle. So geriatric care management always will start with an assessment of, what are your medical needs, what are your mental health needs, what are your social needs, what support systems exist for you, how good of a fit is your current environment with your current needs and your long-term care needs. And once that assessment is complete, the care manager will work with you and your loved ones to develop a care plan. I always like to say that the care plan is, it's a work in progress. So we're always going back to reassess as we put plans into place and see how things go. In addition to that, it's a partnership. And so there generally will be tasks for the care manager to achieve and tasks for you or your loved ones to carry out, so we can work together in partnership to provide, the person needing care with the, the best kind of client-centered plan that meets their needs and also addresses the things that are most important to them. So okay, next slide. So one of the things I didn't talk about in that ALCA circle is crisis intervention. And most often, care management gets called in in the middle of a crisis. So one of the things we like to do is hopefully work with folks before crisis happens. But if you are unable to identify a care manager to work with you or your loved one before that happens, just know that these are some of the situations when some of the types of situations when care management can be helpful. So, for example, if you haven't been to the doctor in a long time and you've turns out that your provider is retired or passed away, and you are, not wanting to burden your loved ones with, finding someone new or someone accompanying you and making sure that your new physician's a good fit. The care manager, that's a place where care management might be able to step in and support you in finding a physician who's a geriatric specialist, for example. These are the next two are examples of ways that we might be family caregivers to our other loved ones. And, when you are confronted with a really significant change in their bio, psycho, or social needs, right? So either they've had a change in health condition, as this example gives you, a really clear indication that someone is starting to have significant memory problems, or in the third example, a psychosocial or issue where an older adult might be vulnerable to undue influence, or somebody who is being predatory towards a vulnerable elder. So those are always places where you can reach out for support and assistance from care management. All right.
Sorry, I
Francie,
moved to that
I'm gonna wrap this
slide
up.
pretty quickly. I know that we were rushing at the end here, so we can have some time for a Q&A. But obviously, it's important to consider the way that you want to live and the choices that you make and the impacts that they'll have. So everyone has their own individual way of making these decisions, and so we want to support you in making the right decisions with having some good questions to ask. So here's a little bit of our resources that we have, and now it's time for Q&A. And I'll stop sharing.
Let's see. Well, thank you. There was a lot of information in that, and hopefully maybe we could have you guys back and we could maybe kind of break them down into a little more pinpointed information points. But anyways, I do have a few questions. One was there was some questions in regards to getting a list of the resources that were discussed, and I'm happy to send out an email to everyone with a list of the resources and the addresses, the HTML addresses after. So let's see, and then for questions, there was a question in regards to the village, and I actually had a question in regards to the village aspect as well. I mean, is that more of like a neighborhood thing, or is that when you mention towns, I mean, San Francisco is a city. So, and you did mention there was a SF village, but can you just give us just a little bit more information on the village concept?
I can speak to that. San Francisco Village is, it's a membership organization that's run with volunteers. And so the volunteers offer help for people in their homes that maybe it's not caregiving help, but they may be able to drive them places. They may be able to go assist them with a doctor's visit. I know in Marin a couple of years ago, it was $365 for the year, which is unbelievably inexpensive when you think about home care and care needs. So they also have some connection or community type events and things like that. So you can access it in every city has a village these days, especially in the Bay Area. And oh, the model is interesting too. It was developed in Boston, and there was an area there that they built the system for this small community, and that was the model that has grown all across the country.
I would add.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
I would add that I just saw in prep for this, Village to Village Network is a website, and I believe that's where you can search your location to be able to identify specifically for your area, assuming that they've registered that way.
Awesome. Let's see. How can I find financial help to manage my assets? I wonder if that's like something. I talked to a financial advisor, but all he could offer was purchasing info or purchasing into the stock market. I know, is that a question for you guys?
So it depends on the kind of financial support that they're looking for. There's a professional organization called PFAC, which is Professional Fiduciaries. And then you can kind of look at the list on their website. That's P as in Paul, FAC, and they'll have different fiduciaries that will, when you look at each one, it'll highlight their specialty, because financial support could mean daily money management. And there are daily money managers that can come in and just help clean up people's financial circumstances so that they know what the next step is.
I wanted to add also that the fiduciaries they're really experts in managing finances in a long-term care plan. So kind of presenting them with your overall financial picture and them looking at, how much home care you can afford, for example, or, whether your care is going to need to be managed more affordably in an assisted living or, whatever. So they can really take a look at that big picture, but they don't necessarily manage investments.
So we do have a lot of people asking for the list of resources. Again, I'll be happy to send out an email to all attendees with the list. This recording will actually be available later in the week that you could revisit. I'll also include the link to the recording. And then you can have access to the PowerPoint presentation. Let me see. Are aging resources the same for lifetime disabled people?
Well, I would say yes. There's different kinds of ways to get support in a financial support for those, depending on where you qualify. So for instance, it's disability. Cherie, you could probably really talk to this as well more directly, because you deal with a broader population of people with needs.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to, it's one of those situations where, right, we really have to individualize a plan based on what, again, like what resources are available, what exactly the needs are. I know there's oftentimes, for example, working with folks who survived polio as a child, as they age, start to develop what we call post-polio syndrome, where some of the modifications that have been made to their living environments somehow are now no longer helpful enough. And so there needs to be another level of evaluation and accommodation to what the needs are. So I'd encourage you to seek out a care manager in your area who might offer a consultation around any changing needs you might have if you are finding that what previously had worked for you is no longer working.
Is there a resource person to talk to in making advanced plans for one's aging? And how early should this discussion take place? How far before services might be needed?
That again is that Aging Life Care Professional. So you can look on their website for Aging Life Care Professional Association, ALCA, and they do list in your area. You can search, and find a geriatric care manager, and they'll list their specialties on that site. That's a good place to start. Some people, you can pay for service or have a stipend or however you want to set it up. It just depends on the care manager, but that's a good place to start.
We kind of have a comment here that that we should try to start thinking about life changes well in advance of needing them. This is just coming from experience of helping elder loved ones who who found it hard to make changes. So everybody that is here today, this is your first step to making those choices. And let's see, I understand that there's a lot of technology that can help seniors living at home. Could you address the pros and cons, please?
Okay.
I'm going to say that's a full hour just in and of itself, at least. I mean, there's no substitute for human touch, but there are wonderful ways that technology can alert your humans in your circle when help is more likely to be needed. Even something like an Apple iWatch can be utilized to improve someone's safety at home. So, and yeah, there's a lot of other options. So yes, maybe Louis, you should put it on your agenda for a future topic, because it's a big topic and it's changing all the time.
Yeah, awesome.
Technology can be your friend. I will say that, especially living independently in your home. There are medication boxes that drop meds. You're not wanting to have a caregiver. There's monitoring systems where they're not invasive, where it's just tracking motion to see if somebody's up at night. So there's all kinds of technologies that are really focused on aging in place.
And then some of the other comments, Berkeley does have a village as well. Let's see.
Berkeley has a great village, by the way. Yeah. Shout out to Berkeley. It's an amazing village, yeah, and has been in existence for a long time. And there's the wonderful thing about, and Sausalito also has a great village. It depends on your community, volunteers is what runs it. And so who's leading it is really, really important. And so that's something to consider when building a village. You can actually build a village in your own little neighborhood.
And then Carrie Sweeney, she is the executive director for the center at Berkeley. She says she refers to fixed fee financial advisors, and then she provides some info in the link. It's www.napfa.org, financial planning, and I'll include that in my email. Let me see, I think that is it. Let me see if there's any other questions. So I think that's it. I think that we've gone through all the questions. Thank you again. This has been very, very informative. And we hope that we get to see you again. You provided a lot of really important information. And again, some of it can definitely be zeroed in on to get some more details on that. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, I will have an email out to all attendees with the link to the program and with the recording of the program. And then I'll include specific links to some of the resources mentioned. But thank you, Francie and Cherie, Jamie, and Meredith for joining us today. Thank you, Dorla, for the introduction. And we will see everybody soon. Thank you, guys.